Don't worry, it's not even loaded." They laughed as they handed her the rifle. Just a joke for the new girl at the range. She didn't smile, didn't speak, just chambered around, adjusted once, and fired. The target didn't just move the button, behind it dropped. Reset alarm. Safety override tripped. And every man on the line just stared because that shot wasn't lucky. It was surgical. If you believe real skill doesn't need a second chance type, she knew. It was a typical casual range day at the municipal shooting facility. Off-duty police officers, civilian shooting enthusiasts, and a handful of competitive marksmen were enjoying their weekend practice sessions. She arrived quietly. No expensive range bag, no flashy tactical gear, just a borrowed military-style jacket and worn leather boots that suggested extensive field experience. A few regular customers chuckled among themselves with obvious amusement. Someone's girlfriend tagging along for the show. "You here to hold the spotting scope while we actually shoot?" She deliberately ignored their condescending comments, positioned herself behind the designated observation line. Her experienced eyes calmly tracking activity in each firing lane with professional interest to when someone offered her a rifle to try. It wasn't offered out of respect. It was pure mockery disguised as false hospitality. "Want to give it a go? Targets are only 600 yards out. We'll spot your inevitable miss for you." Another shooter joked with obvious superiority. "Just don't accidentally shoot yourself in the foot." All right. The weapon they handed her wasn't even properly sighted in for accuracy. They naturally assumed she wouldn't know the technical difference. She didn't respond to their taunts. Just accepted the rifle calmly, walked purposefully to the shooting mat, and dropped into perfect prone position without any hesitation. The safety mechanism clicked audibly. A subtle hush fell over the entire firing line, not from fear or concern, but from growing curiosity about her obvious familiarity with the equipment. She methodically adjusted elevation settings on the scope. Didn't ask anyone for distance calculations. Didn't wait for official spotter confirmation. "You need to actually load it first," someone teased with patronizing amusement. She already had loaded around. The experienced shooters began paying closer attention to her positioning and technique. Something about her movement suggested professional training far beyond recreational shooting. Her breathing pattern was controlled and methodical. Her grip on the weapon was textbook perfect. Her eye alignment with the scope was instinctive rather than deliberate. "She's holding it wrong," one regular whispered to his companion. "No," corrected a more experienced marksman. "She's holding it right. We've been holding it wrong." The range safety officer glanced over from his position, noting her professional setup, but not recognizing the significance yet. Other shooters on the line began pausing their own practice sessions to observe the unfolding situation. There was something about her calm confidence that suggested they were about to witness something unusual. She made one final adjustment to the scope settings, checked wind conditions by observing grass movement downrange, and settled into her final firing position. The target at 600 yards was a standard circular bullseye with scoring rings. Behind it, barely visible, was a small red safety override button used by range staff to reset the automated target system. Most shooters didn't even know the button existed. It was positioned 3 in tall, hidden behind protective steel, plating accessible only through a precise angular shot. Hitting it accidentally would be nearly impossible. Hitting it intentionally would require surgical precision and intimate knowledge of the range's technical systems. She controlled her breathing with mechanical precision, her finger finding the trigger with natural familiarity. The wind was minimal, but present enough that experienced shooters typically compensated for drift. She made no visible adjustments. "You're aiming higher," and a well-meaning shooter advised from behind her position. She exhaled slowly, her finger applying steady pressure to the trigger mechanism. The moment stretched in perfect silence. Every person on the firing line waited to see what would happen when the supposedly inexperienced woman took her shot. They expected a miss. They expected embarrassment. They expected confirmation of their assumptions about her capabilities. They were about to discover how wrong assumptions could be. She aligned her sight picture perfectly. one hand steadying the bipod with professional precision, the other feathering the trigger with practice calm that suggested thousands of hours of training. The wind wasn't particularly strong, but sufficient that the regular shooters always compensated for lateral drift. She made no visible adjustments for environmental conditions. "You're aiming high," a concerned shooter said from behind her position. She exhaled slowly through pursed lips and fired. The sharp crack of the rifle echoed across the range. The target at 600 yards wobbled slightly from the impact. But then something unexpected happened behind it. A small red switch snapped down with mechanical precision. A distinctive beeping tone immediately followed the reset alarm for the range's automated reactive target system. Everyone on the firing line went completely still. The range safety officer looked up sharply from his clipboard. Did she just hit the override button? A nearby, competitive shooter whispered with obvious disbelief. That switch is 3 in tall, positioned behind steel plating. Nobody hits that, not even on purpose. It had to be an accident, someone mumbled nervously. No, it wasn't, said the range safety officer with growing amazement. Look at the trajectory angle. She calculated it perfectly. She meant to hit that specific target. She stood gracefully, cleared the weapon, following proper safety protocols, and handed it back to its owner without speaking a word. The assembled shooters made space around her like she was carrying something dangerous they couldn't understand. One experienced marksman finally found his voice and muttered, "Who exactly is she?" Another added with obvious respect. "Nobody does that kind of shot. That's surgical precision." She nodded once with quiet acknowledgement. "It's what I do." The implications began sinking in among the experienced shooters present. Hitting the reset button required not just exceptional marksmanship, but intimate knowledge of the range's technical systems. Someone would need to understand the exact positioning, the protective steel angles, and the precise trajectory calculations. This wasn't lucky shooting. This was professional demonstration of capabilities far beyond recreational marksmanship. "How did you know about the button?" the range safety officer asked with obvious curiosity. She looked at him directly. "I helped install the system." The revelation hit the assembled shooters like a physical blow. She wasn't a curious amateur trying shooting for the first time. She was someone with professional background in range operations in advanced marksmanship. When someone asked before you had keys to this facility, she replied simply, the regular customers began understanding that they had been witnessing something far more significant than a casual shooting demonstration. This was a professional returning to evaluate current standards and capabilities. And based on their initial treatment of her, they had failed that evaluation badly. "Are you military?" one veteran asked respectfully. Which she answered, "Now I'm something else." The range officer checked his entry logs. Her name wasn't listed anywhere on the sign-in sheets because she hadn't signed in through normal procedures. She didn't need to follow standard protocols. Her access to the facility predated their current security systems. "What do you think of our operation?" the range master asked carefully. She surveyed the firing line, noting safety violations and equipment issues that others had missed. "You've gotten comfortable," she observed. "Comfort makes you careless." The assessment stung because it was accurate. They had been treating the range like a social club rather than a precision training facility. Her single shot had demonstrated the difference between recreational shooting and professional marksmanship and exposed their assumptions about capability based on appearance. The lesson was delivered without lecture or criticism, just through undeniable demonstration of superior skill. Later that afternoon, someone discreetly ran her vehicle license plate number through a private database. Absolutely nothing came up in any standard records, but one of the range instructors noticed something significant on her jacket sleeve. A tiny faded emblem that most people would overlook completely. "That's Ghost Link's insignia," he whispered to a colleague with obvious recognition. Only one specialized team ever used that designation, but they officially dissolved operations years ago. The range master immediately called an old military contact, a former instructor at the prestigious Black Rock Tactical Training Facility. The reply came back within minutes. "If she's who I think she is, stay completely out of her way." She's not there to show off for entertainment. She's there to evaluate whether you're maintaining proper standards. Someone checked the official range entry logs more carefully. Her name wasn't listed anywhere on the daily registration list. That's because she hadn't signed in through normal civilian procedures. She didn't need to follow standard protocols. She had trained at that facility long before any of the current staff had access keys. Rumors spread rapidly through the shooting community. By evening, the facility owner had moved the rifle she had used to a prominent display case labeled confirmed precision shot 602 yards reset button override. One of the regular competitive shooters approached her quietly before she left and asked, "Do you ever provide advanced training instruction?" She studied him carefully. "Not anymore." "Why not?" he pressed with genuine curiosity. "Because most people want to talk about shooting before they learn to listen to instruction." Her answer revealed the fundamental problem she had observed that day. The regular shooters were more interested in discussing their equipment and comparing scores than in actually improving their fundamental techniques. They had mistaken familiarity with the range for competence with marksmanship. Her demonstration had exposed the difference between recreational shooting and professional precision. "What would it take?" the competitive shooter asked persistently. "Silence," she replied, "and the understanding that everything you think you know is probably wrong." The harsh assessment wasn't delivered with cruelty, but with the clinical accuracy of someone who had witnessed the consequences of overconfidence. In combat situations, assumptions about capability could cost lives. Recreational shooters had the luxury of missing targets. Professional marksmen did not. "How do we know if we're ready for that kind of training?" he asked. She pointed toward the target system where her shot had triggered the reset alarm. "When you can do that consistently, you are ready to begin learning." The standard she had set was impossibly high for recreational shooters, but it represented the minimum acceptable performance for professional operations. Her presence at the range hadn't been coincidental. She had been conducting an evaluation, and the results had confirmed her suspicions about declining standards in civilian marksmanship training. "Are there others like you?" someone asked. "Fewer than there used to be," she replied. "More than you'd expect." The cryptic answer suggested a network of highly trained professionals operating outside official recognition. People who maintain capabilities that official agencies preferred to keep unofficial. She gathered her minimal equipment and prepared to leave the facility. "Will you come back?" the range master asked hopefully. "That depends," she said, "on whether you remember what you learned today." The lesson wasn't about her impressive shooting. It was about their assumptions, their complacency, and their need to maintain higher standards. Whether they learned from the demonstration would determine if she considered the facility worth her future attention. Professional evaluation delivered through undeniable performance rather than written reports. The most effective way to communicate with people who thought they already knew everything. She never returned to that particular shooting range, but her legendary performance became a permanent part of the facility's culture and reputation. New shooters were told about the button shot like it was an almost mythical achievement that redefined their understanding of precision marksmanship. No one made inappropriate jokes when women picked up rifles at the facility anymore. The casual mockery that had characterized the rank's social atmosphere disappeared completely, replaced by respectful acknowledgement that capability couldn't be determined by appearance. A custom brass plaque was professionally mounted behind shooting lane 3, where she had made her demonstration. It read simply, "One shot, no doubt. Professional standards maintained here." The plaque served as a permanent reminder that excellence existed beyond their recreational understanding. And every now and then, someone would report spotting her at another shooting facility in a neighboring town, walking quietly to the firing line with the same understated confidence. No one approached her for conversation or autographs, but everyone instinctively made room for her to work. Her reputation spread through regional shooting communities like a professional legend. Range masters began implementing higher safety standards and more rigorous training protocols, hoping to earn the kind of respect her single shot had commanded. Competitive shooters started questioning their own techniques, in seeking advanced instruction to bridge the gap between recreational accuracy and professional precision. The Faisal's equipment was upgraded to military specifications rather than civilian convenience standards. Training programs were restructured to emphasize fundamental techniques over casual social interaction. Her brief visit had catalyzed improvements throughout the shooting community, not through criticism or formal instruction, but through undeniable demonstration of what true competence looked like. Years later, shooting instructors would reference Ghost Link standards when describing the difference between adequate performance and professional excellence. Students would ask about the legendary button shot, though few believed it was technically possible until they saw the range's security footage. The video became an unofficial training tool studied frame by frame to understand the mechanics of precision shooting under pressure. Military contractors began recruiting at civilian ranges looking for shooters who demonstrated the kind of calm competence she had exhibited. But none matched her combination of technical skill and psychological composure. Her single shot had revealed not just individual capability, but the existence of training standards that exceeded anything available in civilian programs. People began understanding that some skills could only be developed through experiences that recreational shooters would never encounter. Combat veterans who had witnessed similar precision recognized the significance immediately. Civilian enthusiasts required longer to comprehend what they had observed, but eventually everyone understood that they had been in the presence of someone whose capabilities represented the absolute pinnacle of marksmanship training. The range's business increased significantly as people came hoping to train where the legend had demonstrated her skills. But the facility standards had been permanently elevated. Casual shooters who couldn't meet basic safety requirements were politely directed to less demanding facilities. The range became known for serious training rather than social recreation. Her influence extended far beyond a single shot at a single facility. She had reminded an entire community that mastery was possible even if most would never achieve it. The lesson resonated through every subsequent training session and competition. Excellence existed. It could be recognized, and it demanded respect. Her brief presence had changed not just one range, but an entire approach to marksmanship training through demonstration rather than discussion, through performance rather than promotion, through quiet competence that spoke louder than any words ever could. If you believe mastery speaks for itself, subscribe to The Ordinary Heroes.